Today I'm going to talk about me and Michael. Our love story. So, let's start. Also, trigger warning, I'm eating. In case that bothers anybody, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about I'm eating. We're going to start in the year 2001. And it is, let's say, mid-spring. And I am hanging out with my bestie one night. I was 19. I was 19 years old. Hanging out with my bestie. And her cousin was single. And he was cute. And he and I talked for a hot second. Now that plays an important part in me and my husband's beginning. So that guy was Michael's childhood best friend. And Michael saw my senior pictures in his car one night at a party. And Michael told him he was going to contact me. And this guy was like, yeah, probably not. Like, she's from Meigs County. You'll never find her number. Lo and behold, it was the end of June 2001. I'm sitting now. It was the end of May 2001. Michael called me. Just this random number. And I picked up. And I was still talking to his friend. It was never anything serious. We were just talking. But Michael called. And I had a conversation with him on the phone for like an hour. And it was probably one of the most in-depth conversations I'd ever had with somebody of an opposite sex. And I'd never met this guy. Had not a clue what he looked like. Nothing. But there was something about his voice on the phone I couldn't forget. So after that phone call, just a few weeks after, me and his friend called it quits. Now, that was the end of May, and now it's July 4th, and this is me and Michael's first official meeting. And that friend I had mentioned in the beginning of this, my bestie at the time, which was a cousin of this guy. And July 4th, I was going to her home to pick her up. We were going to go downtown to watch fireworks. And when I pulled in her driveway, there was a purple Harley. And I'm not going to lie, 19-year-old Des thought she was a NASCAR driver. And I was probably driving really fast on a dirt road. And when I pulled up into that driveway, I remember pulling up and it was kind of like a curve. And like once you curved, his motorcycle was sitting right there. And I like come up and I was like, Arr! I about slammed it. So I get out of the car. I still have no idea who this is. And I get out of the car. I go in to get my friend. And her mom is like, hey, this is Michael Lease. And I was like, oh, hey. And wow. Like, he had a sexy voice that I couldn't get out of my head. But now he also is extremely hot. Like, coal black hair, tall, thin, gorgeous teeth. So handsome. It was kind of like love at first sight. But I will say, okay. So we meet on July 4th. We kind of say hi, like no conversation. And me and Ashley, the friend, her and I leave. And we go downtown to entertain the festivities going on downtown. And he comes to look for us. He doesn't find us, but he does come to try to find us. So I think it was like a couple days later, he calls me and he was like, I think we should go out. No, I lied. So a couple days later, I called him. That's what it was. I called him. So he calls me first. We talk on the phone. I'm still seeing Ryan. And then him and I call it quits. I meet him on July 4th at Susie's house. And just a couple days after that, I can't remember the date, but I called him. And that was it. That's the rest is history. No, there's a lot more to this story. But let's see. So he comes down to Meg's on his Harley, and he picks me up, and I want to say we just rode downtown to like McDonald's or something. Like, it wasn't nothing major. And then I don't know exactly. I can't remember exactly how this went down. Like, it's been 20 years ago. So I can't remember if I came to him in Wellston first or if he came to me on the Harley first. I can't remember. But there was 2 meetings. He came to me once, and I came to him. I drove out to Wellston. He lived with a friend. They rented a home right before you get into town in Wellston. And I went out. And I want to say our first date was Wendy's in Jackson. Like, our first date. Non-official. And then our first official date, we took his dad's 67 Chevelle. And we went to a rib place in Athens. And I can't think of the name of it. I can't think of it. It was ribs. It was really good, but I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, long story very short, for this part, is we met and we became inseparable very quick. Now, July 4th is the day that we officially start talking, and October 12th, is when my mom passes away. So, like, it's a very short-lived time there, and they didn't really get to know each other. Those two didn't, Michael and my mom. But they did meet, and she did very much like him. I will say that at this time in my life, I was living in just an efficiency, 1-room apartment right beside of my mom's house. And Michael was the first guy ever in my life that spent the night with me, ever. And I remember the first night that he spent with me, my mom called. It was like 2 a.m., And she was like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry we fell asleep. We may have been doing other things. I'm just saying. At that time, we was probably asleep. Let's see. I was like, I'll wake him up and make him go home. And she was like, no, when he wakes up in the morning, just tell him to go home. And I was like, all right. So, like, that happens a few times over this, few months that she is alive. And Michael and I's relationship was golden. And honestly, I can say this now in my life, and that is my mom was so controlling that had she not passed away, I don't know that I would have ever got my happiness with Michael. And I say that because she would have undermined or made herself a large factor when she didn't belong. So, first lesson in this story is sometimes you have to lose something in order to gain something. Probably at the time not a trade that I wanted to make, but now in time, it saved my life. Michael saved my life. So let's go back into Michael. October, my mom passes away. Then Michael and I's relationship gets really fucking rocky. Like, bad rocky. And we're new. We're 3 months in. And when I tell you losing my mom set me down a downward spiral, I didn't know how to stop it. So it was really difficult for Mike and I to navigate that. First being, I started having something that mimicked a grand mal seizure. And that was a panic attack. But I went through extensive testing to find that out because it's almost like I would pass out. I would just drop and shake, and my anxiety was debilitating. Truly, it was debilitating. I remember having those episodes a few times, and Michael, in a way, was kind of like my mom. Sounds kind of funny. My mom would always have been like, suck it up, knock it off. Like, it didn't matter if I needed to do it or if I was just being a brat. Like, she didn't care. And that was kind of how Michael treated me at this time. And I may have thought in the moment that he was being a complete prick, but now I realize that, again, he saved me. He was something that he was a light that had been brought into my life, and I was not willing to let it go. Now, very soon in this story, the light gets very quickly dimmed, and Michael and I go through some really hard times. Really hard times. So after my mom dies, like I said, my depression was really bad. Mike and I went down a bad path. And I'm not saying that we didn't still choose each other and we didn't want to be together. It was just really hard to communicate. I've not ever been really great at communication anyway. If I am done with you, I just shut down and walk away. I don't know how else to be. But, so my communication has never been my strong suit. I'm way better now. So October 12th, the following see. A year. Actually, hear me out. So my mom passed away in October, and even though I was the biggest shit show of my entire life in that moment, in February, Michael proposed. So even through my worst time in my life, up to this point, he still knew I was the one. Like, he knew that, even in that rough time. Now, we get engaged in February, and I get so excited, I'm like planning a wedding. I want to plan a wedding. I want a big wedding, right? Like, everybody wants a big wedding. I want a big wedding. I want to be a princess. So I start planning a wedding. I start shopping for wedding dresses and blah, 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 blah. And in, let's see, September, I found out I was pregnant. So Michael and I's time together was very, very, very short-lived. But I will say, right now in this story, as I get to the end of the story where I am right now, Michael and I are living our togetherness right now. Our child's grown. He does still live here, but he's completely capable of taking care of himself, and he does. So we are completely for each other. Now, it gets bad. So through the pregnancy, it got bad. Hormones was raging. I didn't deal very well with it. My mom had passed away. I didn't deal very well with that. His mom and dad were a part of our lives. And he has a sister. She was also a part of our lives. I do have family also. My family has never really been that close with us ever. Our whole life. We've always been closer with his side of the family. His mom and dad were not married. And they had been divorced for several years. But they still did a lot of things together as a family. So I don't know I don't know what it was, but when I tell you that the hatred that I had for her, my mother-in-law, it was bad. And I want to say now in my life, it was because I was jealous, maybe, that Michael still had a mom, and I did not. His mom was a lot of the issue for me in the beginning of our relationship. And it was things like, I feel every mother and daughter-in-law, mother-in-law, daughter-in-law, maybe face to some extent. And it's things like, I now am the mother of a son, and his entire life, I have been the one to care for him, make his food, clean his house. I'm his mom. And when Michael and I moved in together, after my mom had passed, we moved in together. We had stayed together prior to her passing, but once she passed away, we pretty much, I never left him. It was him or Jeff Reichman, and I can't explain. There was always this uneasy feeling being around him. There just was. So when I moved in with Michael, Deb would do things that I took very direct, like a direct hit at me, like targeted completely. She was doing it to me, and you couldn't have convinced me any other way. And this is gonna make me sound like a real petty bitch. And I am, or was, maybe not now, but this is the shit that I did not want, did not accept. And that was help. And that's all the woman ever really wanted to do, I believe, now. You could not have convinced me of that then. Like, she would, I'd say I wouldn't be home. And she would come into the trailer, which we lived in, was on his father's property. It was his grandmother's trailer, and we took it over. And she would come into it. It was her trailer. Like, before ours, it was hers. So she would come into it and do laundry, and she would, like, I would come home and there would just be shit everywhere. Like, clothes just piled up on the table and the countertops, and just fucking shit everywhere. Like crazy. And when I tell you, my anxiety would go so frantically through the roof. And I feel like she was like, why are you so panicky? And this thing up here, well, it told me that if I didn't have my house spotless when Michael got home, that I'd be in trouble. But that was never really anything that Michael ever did to make me feel that way. That was my mom. That is called post-traumatic stress syndrome. PTSD. I have it a bunch. But there was moments like that that triggered me so bad when I was young from childhood trauma. And I didn't realize what was happening. But I did, however, react. And that wasn't good. Because before my mom passed away, you probably couldn't have paid me to say shit. Literally. I wouldn't have said it. And after she passed away, you couldn't pay me to shut the fuck up. It was like when she left, all of her good and bad, flooded me. And I had zero problem from that moment on speaking my mind, ever. And that was something that Sandy never struggled with. She could speak her mind at any given moment. She didn't care whose feelings she hurt. And I don't necessarily know that that's a good quality, but I also possess that quality. So it was a lot of misunderstanding and miscommunication between me and my mother-in-law in the beginning. And I had zero desire to fix it. None. I didn't want her love. I didn't want to accept it. I really didn't want her around me. I had Michael. He was mine. And I just had lost the only thing that I ever really felt was mine. That was my mom. So I have replaced her with Michael. And he instantly became my everything. And he still is to this day. So that's a little catch up to pregnancy. So all of this is leading up to me finding out I'm pregnant. And when I tell you that the pregnancy came and my hormones were just out of this world crazy, which everybody's is. I wasn't, I'm not the only person that's ever had a kid, won't be the last. But I just, it was my first kid, my only kid, my only pregnancy that I was fully aware of. I mean, I'm not saying that I never had a miscarriage, but I wasn't aware of it if I did. The animosity that I had toward my mother-in-law prior to being pregnant was insane. And that quadrupled when I got pregnant. And my entire pregnancy, I was on edge because of stories that I had heard about her and my mother-in-law and things that she had done in the past. And I will go out on a limb and say none of what she did was bad, but at the time, I just took it completely the wrong way. And that was that she had helped a child out of a bad situation that had been sexually abused or was trying to. And now mind you, at this time, I have no recollection of being sexually abused. None. And the only thing that I heard out of that story was that she tried to take someone's child away from them. And that was not at all what was happening. But that's all I heard. And my fear throughout that entire pregnancy was that she was going to try to take my child from me. Crazy, right? It's absolutely fucking crazy how your mind works and the shit that it will make you believe when you are depressed. So, very shortly after I found out I was pregnant, I started with morning sickness. And it very quickly became all-day sickness. And I could barely keep food down. So, in and out of the hospital all the time because I was so sick. My anxiety on top of it probably was not helping. So I remember, and this is how bad, like this is legit. Like it wasn't just me thinking that she made me have anxiety. She didn't make me. My feelings toward her made me have anxiety. And I remember being in the hospital one time, sick, and she had called my cell phone. And just seeing her name pop up on my phone made my blood pressure go so high that the nurse came in to my room and said, whoever you are talking to, tell them not to call back here again. Wow. That is how I reacted toward her. I don't know why. I can't explain that. I don't know. I don't know why I don't know why I hated so bad, but I did. So this sickness goes on throughout this pregnancy, and Michael and I are just constantly at each other's throats, just bitching, just bitching back and forth about everything. And he was stuck in the middle of this horrendous situation between two women that he loved. And that was me, his fiance, the mother of his child, and his mom. And I will say that I never, ever suggested that Michael not have a relationship with his mom or dad, ever. But I did not want one with her at all. At all. So, at week 24 is when I become toxic. And it was really downhill after that. Because I was on bed rest. Everything had to be done for me. I had to depend on her. I hated that. I fucking hated it. I didn't have anybody else. I didn't have a mom. She was gone. I've never really had a great support system on my side. I don't talk to any of my side of the family. I do have a brother, half brother, and I do have a small relationship with him. And I have a cousin that I speak to, but other than that, I don't really have anybody on my side. So the birth comes, we all learn very dramatically how to love this child. And when I say dramatically, I hated them all. Sometimes even Michael. Like he was mine. And I did not want to share him. And he was also Michael's. I didn't want to share him with him either. So the days ahead get even worse. So I'm off work from GDC. Mike is working at the coal mine. I don't go back to work until Braid is 6 months old. Now, he was in the NICU for 8 weeks. So I was home with him for 4 months before I went back to work. And when I went back to work, Deb was my babysitter. Have I said that I hated that? I can't say that enough. Again, I hated it. I hope karma doesn't bite me in the ass too bad for the way that I treated her. Like, she had never been a grandma before. I had never been a mom before. It was very new. I realize now I didn't give a fuck back then. I didn't care. It wasn't about anybody. It was about me. Selfish. I was selfish. I was very selfish. Mike and I's fighting while Deb was the babysitter was continuous. I made restrictions that was insane. Like, you're only allowed to use one nipple. True story. The bottles. Braid was a breastfed baby. So when I went back to work, obviously he had to drink from a bottle, not the breast. And I read somewhere, or somebody told me, and anybody could have told me anything and it would have been smarter than my mother-in-law. Anybody. So someone says, I don't know, somewhere, someone, I read, some way, I see that the bottles that I have, there was multiple different nipples, and they were all supposed to mimic breast. But I heard that one nipple was better than all the rest, and I demanded that she only use that one nipple. Don't give him the rest of them. Do not. I don't give a fuck what your opinion is. Don't do it. Number 2, don't feed him. What? And I don't mean don't feed him. I mean, you're not smart enough to give him food first. I have to. I can't even explain the fucking crazy that I was. Crazy. I probably still am to some extent. But crazy. So shortly after I went back to work, Michael and I hate each other. We basically hate each other. Because all I do is bitch about his mom. That's it. And all he does is bitch about me. And I didn't see it that way. So this is the kind of fighting that Mike and I did. Probably seems very trivialous. Michael would say things to me like, you need to sweep the floors. Again, trigger. Why? Why does that trigger me? I don't know. Because my mom constantly told me I needed to be better. I needed to do this. I needed to do that. I needed to eat less or I was going to be fat. I just constantly was never good enough. So when Michael would use the word need, you need to do this, didn't go good. And we fought by it for probably, I'm going to say 3 years. The first 3 years of Braid's life was fucked up. We fought over money. We fought over family. We never fought over trust. Trust has never really been an issue. One time. Just one time. I'll get to that. So Braids 3, Michael and I have probably threatened divorce 1,000 times. And when I say threaten, I mean we are in a screaming match. Screaming. I fucking hate you. I fucking hate you. I'm leaving. I was crying. And where was I to go? I had an aunt. Her and I are no longer a thing. But back then, she was my run-to. She was my mom's sister. And I ran to her and ran to her and ran to her over and over again. And I can say this. She always sent me back home. So thank you for that, Delilah. For not telling me it was okay to leave. Because I might have. And then where would I be? So, I'm not, now hear me out. I'm talking bad times. I'm not saying that Michael and I did not have good times. We didn't stay together because we didn't love each other. But it was a 50-50. Like at this point in our lives, it was 50-50. It was good 50% of the time, and it was really fucking bad 50% of the time. And over the next few years, one thing I can say for Michael and I, we have, Michael, since from the moment that we found out we were going to be parents, he never, ever pushed his responsibility off, ever. Like Michael has always been an outstanding father, provider, and husband. But he was not always so fucking calm. Calmness come with age. But he used to be a little on the crazy side. Like I said, it was only ever screaming. We've never been physical with each other, but we've called each other every name in the book. At least 100 times. Oh, I meant 100 million times. Yeah. Okay, so now Michael and I have this really good meeting. I fall in love with him crazy. We have a baby. Our life gets turned upside down. And we are just going through the motions. It was like it became repetitive. Michael and I's biggest problem, I feel like now, back then, was communication. We didn't know how to talk to each other. I said, that's not my great skill, and it's not his either. And instead of saying, hey, this is bothering me, hey, I want to be included, hey, please, whatever, like, I would just expect him to know my feeling. And if he tried to give me his feeling, I went in a level of defense that I can't even explain. Like I was constantly in defense. And you know, that was something that I was in just until a few years ago. Like literally, just constantly in defense. Again, from my past. But I just, Michael's heaven sent. He might not say so, but he is. Now, I want to say Braid was 3. Michael and I are in really bad shape, and I decide to go to counseling. Because I literally, at this point in my life, am so fucking depressed that I sat in my basement a few different times. And I would talk to a girl on the phone that I worked with, and I would cry so hard, and I would say out loud, maybe Michael and Braid would be happier if I was dead. And that was never the truth. But depression overpowers. After I had Braid, Mike called me names. And I feel like to him, it was just slang, joking. He didn't mean anything by it. But he'd call me things like fat ass, fat fucking bitch. And I'm not defending him because that was entirely uncalled for. There's a but. And that is, it was true. I'm not going to say that calling me fat was ever the right thing. Or a bitch. But I probably was a bitch. I'm so grateful that he never gave up on me. I'm still grateful that he doesn't give up on me. Now, I'm going to stop this as part 1. And we are going to leave it at we start marriage counseling. So I will make a part 2 to this, and it will continue the next half of our life. And this half gets really good. So, lesson in this video. Sometimes you have to lose something to gain something. Sometimes, if you do make it through the bad, the good is so much more rewarding than you ever thought possible. I'll see you for part 2.